Hello, hello, hello. Hope you're well on this beautiful sunny day here in good old Blighty. Don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but I hope it's well. Here is one of the first characters of this advert, which I'm giving to you, Patreon subscribers, loyal Patreon subscribers, for you to look at and study and pick apart and criticise and generally pull to pieces. There are some good things and some bad things about this puppet, as we will find with the future puppets to come. She's a mixture of experiments, some of which work, some of which don't work so well. But what I'm trying to do is a consistency of continuity for my own self. I'm starting to use these OGL controllers quite a lot now for all sorts of things. I find them really useful and handy in the way they're configured. And I've started wanting to integrate master controlled stuff directly onto the screen rather than having it as a separate screen. It has its issues doing it that way. One of the things is obviously there's lots of clutter on the screen if you're not too careful. So what I'm trying to do is have a consistent idea of a very simple dot to move the whole character around, and then at least one button on it to show and hide the controls for that character. Be consistent with it. It's a lot easier with these OGL controllers actually to set this up, but yeah, I'm sort of making it in this way. And then in her case, and in the case of quite a lot of the puppets here, I've got another button just above it that turns on render preview, which is just to see how the boil of the line works, because she's got this auto boil thing. And things only boil, in her case, when things have been moved. They don't automatically boil. So it's giving the impression, or trying to give the impression, of movement when she moves. So as if it's a new drawing, as if the artist has sort of not been as clean with their line work, and therefore the line has wobbled a bit when they move. So I'm just going to give you a little idea of how she moves around. So this operates her hips underneath the dress, as you can see. If you want to move the dress around, you just grab hold of the dress and move it around. And the hips also move with it, but you have got a bit more control aside from that if you want it. This moves the dress, so the sort of apron, a bit around. If you want to go in for a bit more control, usually there's a deformer for you to actually get hold of. But for sort of quick movements, you can sort of get hold of this dot. Now I'm trying to remember to do this more and more in my puppets, because I like the idea of being able to move an arm around by the hand. But the downside of this is that you can't move the hand independently of the arm, which sometimes you need to do. So what I've done is I've put a little dot here to allow myself the option of being able to move the hand freely. So I've still got that element of being able to move both things, but it does make life a little bit easier when you're actually moving the arm around, you know. Speaking of arms, this is a brand new idea that I've come up with to make a sort of curved deformer that I can then get hold of the middle part and move around like this. It's been largely successful. It allows me to have her stir a pot very easily just by moving the hand around, rather than having to go into a normal curved deformer and having to sort of change the angles and things. It's a lot faster. It does have a disadvantage, which I'll go over in a minute, and I'm still working on it, because I want this to work, because I actually really like how this works as a movement method. And as a matter of fact, I would much prefer for this to be an extra type of deformer if Toon Boom could actually make this. But until then, I've had to sort of cobble something together that creates this. So what it actually is, you can study it for yourself, it's a weighted deformer with a weighted curve on. So you have to have Harmony 22 to make this work. It's a new thing. There's lots of little fiddly bits here. As I say, it has its issues, so it's not totally working, but it has some constraints involved as well. You know, I'm not going to go into how all of this works, but as far as I remember, there are a few clones. If you want to know if something's cloned, you can see a little plus symbol here, and you have to look for another one that also corresponds with that. So it probably is that one there. So yeah, that is probably, if I move one, let me just show you, if I move that around, you can see those two values are the same. Those aren't, so that one corresponds with something else. You have to hunt for it, basically. As far as I know, there isn't any hotkey that can show you a clone of something, because of course it's not an entire clone. There's only bits of this that are cloned over. I'm going to have to go over through this and rework it, because it's still, it is, I mean, it's overcomplicated, my goodness, but it does at least allow the animation to be undercomplicated. It actually is very good. But as I say, the problem that I have, I'll show you in a second. You move the end part with the sort of donut, the brown donuts. You can sort of change the sort of exaggeration of the arm by moving this sort of purple rectangle thing, whose controllers I think are here. Let me see. So yeah, it would be in that one there. So that must be it. Yeah, purple, definitely. So these are the controls that make this whole thing work, and this dot also allows some degree of middle control. You can sort of work it out by sort of finding the dot, which would be this mid-clone thing, and then sort of figuring out what bits go into it and what bits go out. Anyway, la-di-da. But as I say, the downside of this is I've got constraints here which move, I believe, between this point and that point to allow the rotation to happen very easily, which is great. However, if I get to a certain point, let's pull it up here, and then I move the green thing down and around, it's not too bad. There's a little bit of strange deforming there, which is why I put this in here to sort of help calm that down, that sort of fabric twisty look, which doesn't really work for this kind of thing. But after a while, if you get it in a certain position, it will misbehave. And I'm trying to, you saw it there. There we go. Now, you get this sort of sudden pinching happening. It'll get into a certain pose and it just go ping, like that. There are ways around it. It's basically, at the moment, you're having to just sort of use these things to kind of unpull something to kind of ease the tensions that are going on in this very complicated wave deformation. If I show you, it doesn't really show you that way. What about this? Yeah, this is what's known as a weighted curve, which is a brand new thing, and it uses 4 points to create a curve between it, you see. But in order to use this to easily turn this around, I've had to do some clever things with cloning areas and then using constraints and stuff. As I say, for the most part, it does actually work rather well, but it does have its issues. So be mindful of those. Don't think, Ollie's done this wrong, because of course he's done it wrong. It's a brand new thing. Nobody's ever come up with this before. So, cut me some slack. There we are. So for the most part, I'm very pleased with how it worked, and it made shots with her much easier, but there were a couple of times thinking, damn. This is all constraint based, so you've got the middle part that can move. She can do a hula dance if she wants, and if you want to, you can hold down shift and those points, and then no, you can't do that. Okay, damn. What about that? Oh, you can do it there. Okay, so you can sort of shift. You can shift the middle part like that, and it'll work from the bottom of the dress. So little things like that are quite good. Yeah, like that. That's quite nice. If you want to move the top of her, I recommend that you do it from the neck. Trying to get hold of this part is really tricky. This part is deliberately designed to give the impression that the sort of middle part between her apron strings is able to move around, you see. So it has the advantage of being able to only have to move one part so that you see, that kind of look. But the downside is that you sometimes accidentally grab that rather than what you actually want to grab, which is that part there. Now, the head is both a success and a disaster. This purple donut allowed me to sort of bend and shape this strange head shape in ways that I actually wanted for this character, which is great. And the way that the eyes and the mouth and everything are positioned is largely to do with, I think it was constraints and limits. Let me just see. Deformation of skull, bow, turban. Where's her eyes? Right, shake, head, turn, squash, and track. Yeah, so they use a combination of constraints and limits, so that essentially they're just sort of, they look as if they're stitched onto a big blob. You use limits, they come off constraints like that, and you say, I want a lot of the stuff except the scaling, so that way they look as if they're just sort of attached to the balloon rather than pulling around like the balloon, if you know what I mean. So as if you've stuck stickers onto a balloon. And then you have to do this thing where you, for each thing that you put onto this balloon shape, you have to show controls and then use this sort of crosshair to sort of say where on the balloon you want the thing to be stuck onto. It's a bit of a hidden thing because it's not obvious that you have to do that. But anyway, it works effectively in a similar way to how you get kinematic or point kinematic outputs on a deformer. With a constraint, you have to do these limits, and it does pretty much the same sort of thing. So that's how these work. This, as I say, is both a success and a failure. What it is it manipulates, let me see if I can find the flipping thing. That's the thing, I forget how I've done these things after a while, and I just have to retrace my steps. Port in, I think it's that. Anyway, I think it might be that one. It affects, yeah, it must be that, unless I've face peg. Face peg. And are they? Yeah, so that must be a clone somewhere. So, clone, item, face peg, here we are. So that's actually all, there are several clones of this particular peg, and they all move a nail part of the constraints of the, I can't remember. Anyway, use this to move her head around, and it moves all the bits and pieces around like that. It's a sort of cheap master controller, and I still don't know whether or not this was a better way of doing it as opposed to a master controller. The advantage of having this over a master controller is that it's more adaptable to a squishy shape that keeps changing like this. If I did a master controller, I'm not entirely convinced that it would be able to keep up with the changing shape going on and still being able to sort of do this, essentially this roll effect, which for the most part it does actually rather well. I can still move the mouth around, and it still sort of is able to roll around. So it did actually work fairly well. Don't ask me to explain how I did it because I can't remember now. It was like so many things. I build them up gradually and then I forget what I've done afterwards. That's why I write them down in these books, because there's no way my brain can hold them all in. So yeah, break it down systematically, piece by piece, and you'll be able to figure out what on earth I did. Like I'll have to. Now, these blue dots represent the position of the eye. The reason I did that rather than just grabbing hold of the eye is because they have that ability, which, to be quite honest, I think was a bit of a mistake, because I don't think I actually used this very much at all, and it actually caused more problems than it was worth. The blinking mechanism here, it would have been nice to do that thing which I've later done in characters where the blinking happened automatically and I was able to pull it down, but there we go. Instead, just to compensate, because I essentially did something I didn't like, I had to put these little dots in. These have got, you know, this kind of thing on them, so if you want to change your expression you can. And now, does that operate that or not? Right, so what this is doing, essentially, this round donut is moving this middle part of a deformation. That's all that actually is doing at all. I think I've stitched that to a control, that's right. In order to move a middle part, or well, any part of a deformer using an OGL controller, you can't directly connect it up. What you have to do is use a peg which the OGL controller moves, and then that peg's values are mirrored in the deformation. It's a bit of a fiddle. It's a pain that it has to be that way, but it does, and at least it works. So that's the main thing. So that is essentially moving a middle point of a deformer, a curved deformer, like that. There we go. So, yeah. Have a look at it. Scream and shout and get annoyed that it doesn't work in the way you want, or be delighted that it works in ways you didn't expect. Have a play, that's the main thing. explore and understand new ways of doing things. That's the idea. I hope you like her. As I say, do not think for a minute that she is some finished, polished puppet, because she ain't. She is what she is, and there's a lot that I've learnt from her, and I hope you do too. Good luck with using her, and stay tuned for the next one, which should be coming fairly soon. All right, take care. Bye.